That's a real philosophy. I'll catch you all again very soon.
Online, on the iOS and Android, on your mobile phones. Great speakers conversation around the globe. This is Relaks Radio.
It's time for a show on Relaks Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relaks Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us here 24 hours and let the happiness come to you on Relaks Radio. Tune in to Relaks Radio.
Relaks Radio.
Hello everyone, and good morning everybody. Welcome to the George's Breakfast Buffet. My name is Jorge Shaft, and how are you doing on this morning? The time right now is 8:18, which is about actually a standard actual time for me to be here. Now, first time in a little while, but people have started coming back to the studio, and it's meant that I've actually sort of had to keep to actual standards. So there's that lovely and bubbly little task for you. But speaking of lovely bubbly little tasks, I've got a whole story for you. Yesterday, if you were listening to the show yesterday, you might remember I talked quite a bit about the withdrawal from the withdrawal agreement. Very kind of unwise political bill going through Parliament at the moment, all about Brexit. Brexit, of course, being something that I make no secret of and is very, very clear that I am a huge critic of. I'm somebody who thinks that Britain would have been far, far better off remaining in the European Union in the first place. So, of course, it was with great satisfaction that I watched this first story in The Independent. Watch Ed Miliband attack Boris Johnson as he accuses PM of trying to get Brexit undone. But we're not going to watch the video. Instead, we're just going to go through the article and explain all the stuff that's happened. So, what is this thing? Ed Miliband accused Boris Johnson of seeking to, quote unquote, get Brexit undone. Whoa. During a widely praised speech against the controversial UK Internal Market Bill, the former Labour leader turned shadow business secretary warned MPs that passing the legislation would equip the government with the power to break the law and was a matter of right versus wrong, rather than leave versus remain. However, the most widely shared part of his 25-minute oration, the text of which is now fully released by the Labour Party, involved his attack on the Prime Minister sitting just a few feet away. Oh, that's, welcome to Parliament, everybody's all close by. Anyway, he variously accused Mr. Johnson of incompetence, legislative hooliganism, and seeking to blame others for his own Brexit mess. Mr. Miliband said, quote, "Let's just get this straight for a minute, because I think it is important to take a step back. What the Prime Minister is coming to the House to tell us today is that his flagship achievement, the deal he told us was a triumph. The deal he said, as I said, was oven ready. The deal on which he fought and won the general election is now contradictory and ambiguous. What incompetence, what failure of governance, and how dare he try and blame everyone else." It's pretty, I hope you can see that this pretty biting stuff. Ed Miliband going up there in Parliament. Now they're all discussing the bill and tearing it to shreds. But as with many of these sort of little articles at the beginning, focusing on the big sensation, the headline, the big dramatic thing. It makes you wonder, what is exactly the story behind this. What exactly is the purpose of all this? And also, what ended up happening? Well, from my point of view, at least, the end thing was not actually all that happy in the end. I've got the Guardian newspaper up. They wrote this article at like 11 o'clock at night, so you know this was quick hot off the presses. And its title is Brexit. Internal Market Bill passes by 77 votes amid Tory party tension. So, this is one of those things that really does kind of go, oh, no, not so much annoy me, but just disheartens you a bit when it comes to politics. Like, he gave a big speech. You know, you see in the movies how you've always got these culminatory scenes where, you know, the hero politician, you know, in some kind of, you know, those lighter traditional versions of House of Cards, and they go and make some great speech in front of Parliament, and then everybody claps, and the bus driver, wipes a tear away, and the sun shines. But no, the bill passed. However, 30 Tory MPs abstained, and 2 voted against the controversial bill, which will break international law. So what's all this about? Conservative Party MPs fired a warning shot at Boris Johnson's conduct of the Brexit process on Monday night, as former cabinet ministers and attorney generals withheld their support for a controversial bill which will break international law. One government source said that the Justice Secretary, Robert Buckland, was wobbly and had asked for additional cabinet scrutiny of a controversial clause of the bill. Among those who refused to support the bill on Monday were a slew of senior Conservatives, including select committee chairs and QCs, most notably the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Sajid Javid, and ex-Attorney Generals Sir Geoffrey Cox and Jeremy Wright. Others who abstained included Sir Graham Brady, chairman of the 1922 Committee of Conservative Backbenchers, Liam Fox, and Theresa May, although it was unclear in some cases if people were absent on parliamentary business or whether they were actually, ideologically opposed to it. For example, Theresa May was in South Korea on a planned invitation, on the day that it was actually going forward, though she did very clearly make a big point of saying, hey, by the way, I'm really not happy with this and I don't like the implications of it. So yeah, as I said, a lot of sort of left-wing Twitter, a lot of the kind of more mainstream media in Britain focused a lot on Ed Miliband in those, in the hours leading up to and immediately after the vote itself. It makes sense. You have, of course, if you want to sort of promote that old sort of movie sense of politics, if you want to appeal to the idea of, oh, don't worry, one person who's got your interests at heart is going to make the speech and everything will be all right again, then, yeah, as soon as somebody does make that speech, who does set out all those sound bites that really expose the government for the callousness and incompetence that they exhibit on a daily basis, then that is satisfying. But reality is not so satisfying. In the end, the Brexit, the internal market bill, which will be a breach of international law. The main reason why on this, by the way, is basically because this is something I've noticed that not exactly all that many people have been focusing on. So I will bring it up. Basically, the internal market bill promises, because of the way it's written and structured, it promises a hard border on Ireland, which is a slight problem because you might remember this thing that we recently had called the Troubles. It was a thing in the 90s. People died. It was there were terrorist attacks. It was a whole thing. Look it up. And the peace deal to make the Troubles go away was the Good Friday Agreement, which was 1999, if I remember correctly. I haven't forgotten the date of the Good Friday Agreement. But anyway, I blame a lack of coffee. Anyway, there's the Good Friday Agreement. It's a peace deal. Stops the terrorists from killing people with car bombs. But one of the mutual understandings that made that peace deal work was the fact that both Ireland and the UK were members of the European Union. And this has been an eternal problem. The eternal problem of how do you make sure that the Good Friday Agreement works out in a context of Brexit. And of course the simple answer is, or my answer rather, is of course it's impossible. The demands that the people who voted for Brexit, or at least support Brexit in Parliament, include a very, very strong emphasis on making your own sort of trade deals, your own trade legislation, and being able to sort of protect your market. That would require, and of course the other thing on that is also they have a huge emphasis on restricting immigration. Those two together promise what they call a hard border, meaning that you need to go through lots of passport checks, lots of securities. You need to go get a visa before you can even enter the country. The European Union, though, is one of its founding principles is that it allows with its members the freedom of movement, which means that, you can cross all those borders, say from France to Germany or from Italy to Slovenia, without those checks. Now, Britain actually wasn't part of the pure open borders agreement in the EU called Schengen, but neither was Ireland. And both of the two countries, because there was the whole Northern Ireland problem, there was the troubles, they realised, well, what we could do is we could just do an EU-style open border between Ireland and Northern Ireland, and it won't matter that much because both of us are members of the European Union. This is why people keep bringing it up so much. This is why, in the news, you see so much discussion both of Brexit, but also of Northern Ireland. It also explains why Northern Ireland was so against Brexit, one of the most heavily pro-Remain places in the country. It's exactly all of this. And the reason why the Internal Market Bill is so damaging is because Theresa May, she actually negotiated somewhat of a deal on this issue. Basically going, was what they call the backstop. It was basically, let's keep the border open between Ireland and Northern Ireland and just leave it as, a kind of a temporary opening that will always be open until we find some better arrangement. That was the whole logic. That was the whole idea. That's what the backstop meant. And this was agreed with by Britain with the European Union. Signed it into international law. It was part of the withdrawal agreement. It was part of the transition phase that we're in at the moment. And honestly, that transition phase, the reason why there's still, it seems like millions of people who seem to believe that Britain is still in the European Union. It's not. We left in January. But, well, the Internal Market Bill instead promises to institute those hard borders, basically take over all of the sort of regulations of our own economy in exchange for what? Nationalism? That's all I can really see with it. In addition, it's a breach of the agreement. The European Union, rightly in my opinion, was furious with the proposal of the Internal Market Bill, because if you're going to sit down with a partner and negotiate something, as Barnier has now been spending the past 4 years doing, Michel Barnier being their negotiator in the Brexit sort of debacle, you would at least, at the bare very minimum, expect the other side of the agreement to argue in good faith and to hold to that, deal. But they haven't. Britain has decided to become a bit of a rogue state, and, well, now the majority of MPs have voted for the Internal Market Bill, which promises to really, really annoy the EU, though that's only going to be a positive in the minds of the Brexiters, so maybe I shouldn't be shouting too much about that on the rooftops, but also really annoy the Irish Republicans, people who wanted Northern Ireland to be a part of Ireland all along. The whole backstop, both the backstop and the Good Friday Agreement, allowed these people to have free access to and just free movement to Ireland and a natural qualification for Irish citizenship, which is satisfactory enough, even in their minds. You can pretend to be a part of Ireland even if you're technically not. But yeah, scary times ahead. I'm really not, as you might have guessed, I'm really, really not a fan of the Internal Market Bill, and I'm really fearful what's going to happen now in the next couple of months with regards to Brexit. But I don't really fear so much. I don't really fear so much the idea that there's going to be some other people who will talk in my stead. Yes, sometimes, in the weary, wheels of time, as hairs grow old and wrinkles grow on your face, you might look out in the world and think, it's time for someone else maybe to take my role, to be that new voice in the world, see what they have to say. Except, of course, I'll be coming back after 2 minutes of them talking, so I'll catch you all again very, very soon. See you.
Whoa, Relaks Radio.
আপনি হয়তোবা জানেন না যে রেডিও অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট ইজ 4 times more powerful than any other media. রিল্যাক্স রেডিওতে যদি অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292. আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relax Radio.
It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us, 24 hours, and let the happiness come to you on Relax Radio. Tune in to Relax Radio.
It has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relax proudly presents Relax Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaxmedia.com. RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relax Radio.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the George's Breakfast Buffet. My name is Jorge Shaft, and joining me in the studio today is actually a person. Though not technically in the actual studio itself, it's more in the radio station building generally. But it is still a bit of a crazy sensation. We've just gotten, we just sort of got actually like a new volunteer to help out, of the radio station, do some behind the scenes stuff. And they're showing up at the set early in the morning, same time as me. It's a bit of a weird feeling, sort of showing up to the station and, somebody then kind of waving at me while I'm entering and joining me. but I quite like it actually. I feel actually a lot more sort of freedom now about it because I felt after the show a bit of a sort of responsibility. It's like, oh, I'm gonna sort of sit down and hold the fort and make sure that everything goes fine. In the studio while the sort of like security stuff is not all open. But now there's somebody else here, and I'm all kinds of excited to see what the future holds. What I'm not so excited about the future to hold is, of course, Brexit, which was the subject I was talking about earlier. In the last segment, now for those of you who've only just caught in, I was talking about how the internal market bill is, in my opinion, a travesty upon Britain's international reputation and a clear sign both that this entire time Britain has been acting as a bad faith actor in these Brexit negotiations and arrangements, but also think that it's something that's going to risk people dying because it fundamentally violates the logic with which the Good Friday Agreement, the peace deal between the United Kingdom and the Northern Irish terrorists and the IRA, as I said, all kinds of not very excited on that front. But maybe you are. Maybe you actually do think there's some positive that could come out of it. If you are, then of course I would be very, very happy to read your comments on the Facebook live stream. I always make sure to check the Facebook live stream to, see what the people are saying. We do actually have a comment on today. Sonar Sopon, who is saying congratulations. Not really sure what the congratulations are for, but thank you very much for the kind words. You have gotten a little heart. And let's keep going straight to it. Now, the thing about Brexit is, you might have noticed I've gotten a bit of a theme, a bit of a trend when I've been discussing this topic. And that's been a slightly hopeless topic. Because, well, any look at sort of my voting CV, if you will, and campaigning CV will show that I've been a bit on the wrong side of things over the past couple of years. I campaigned heavily for Remain in the 2016 referendum. Obviously, that didn't work out. I then campaigned heavily for the Labour Party in 2019, which also didn't work out. 2017, I largely sat out, but I ended up voting for one of the most pro-Remain MPs that the Labour Party was offering in that election too. So it's throughout the entire time as well, I've been vocal on multiple platforms in multiple ways about the fact that I think that Brexit was a bad idea. Heck, I've even joined Steve Bray shouting at Parliament, "Stop Brexit," on more times than the average person. But even with all of that caveats aside, I do think there is something of interest to just wonder, like, why is this happening? What is going on? And I don't mean the going on, it's like, oh, why did Brexit happen? That's a topic that's been done to death. What I mean instead is, why is Britain being so gung-ho and so utterly, I guess, beyond care, is probably the best way of putting it, when it comes to the subject of the Brexit deal? I've kind of accepted the idea that Britain's going to Brexit. I personally actually accepted that in the day after the referendum, though at that time, well, I'd say the tensions weren't quite as high as they are now, but I think actually the tensions gotten a bit lower than they were at that point, especially considering there's that murder of the MP Joe Cox. But anyway, let's go to the article which I've got planned out for you, and that is in the Byline Times. I think the Byline Times has been a very interesting sort of outlet in recent months. It's a source that's very much all about the, hey, by the way, here's the stories that nobody else was telling you. And that's something I actually really appreciate. That is, by the way, something that sometimes includes me because, various sort of time schedules mostly, I must admit. One little story which I've not really been able to cover because it's not had a good time was Edward Snowden. But anyway, this title is Consumed by Lies, Britain's masochistic trashing of its own global reputation. All right. With Boris, there is no plan for no deal because we're going to get a great deal. These were words said by the then Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson in the House of Commons when he was challenged on a lack of preparation for a Brexit deal in July 2017. Today, however, the same Boris Johnson is telling the country that he was right from the start, that a no deal would be the best outcome, would be a good outcome for the UK. This, combined with the news that the forthcoming UK Internal Market Bill will seek to undermine parts of the Brexit withdrawal agreement, which Johnson himself signed and Parliament ratified only 10 months ago, signify an intensification of the rhetoric surrounding the 8th and last round of UK-EU negotiations due to take place this week. Several things may be going on, and they are not mutually exclusive. All of these may be running concurrently. First of all, there's the predictable level of saber rattling, that precedes such negotiations, which is, fair enough, and it is something that at this point I've kind of almost tuned myself out to a bit when it's like, oh, we're going to do some big negotiations, and oh, hey, look, all the both sides are making their big, bold claims, loudly proclaiming, like, hey, we're the best, and we're going to be the ones who win the negotiations. I've actually been doing a little bit of a course recently on negotiations and been finding that, like, you don't win negotiations per se. You get deals that both sides are happy with. But anyway, second, though, there may be a level of expectation management, so that if a deal does eventually materialize, however thin and however awful, it can be presented as a magnificent achievement. The third, and this is the classic Dominic Cummings technique. Dominic Cummings, by the way, being the modern day Rasputin, as I've been calling him, the advisor who is unelected yet holds massive bureaucratic control over the UK as it stands at the moment. The guy who went to Barnard Castle, even though he wrote the COVID-19 lockdown rules, and then claimed he went for an eye test, which was so laughably and obviously a lie that it's amazing that something like 20% of the country actually believed him on it. Anyway, there may, however, says the Byline Times, be an effort to create a more chaotic atmosphere in order to create disorder on the EU side and to disrupt its advantage. If this is partly the aim, then it has not worked. The reaction from the European Union has been, for the most part, a weary roll of the eyes and steely determination. The resignation of Sir Jonathan Jones, the head of the government legal service, on Tuesday morning, last Tuesday morning, by the way, this is last week, after a reported major spat over Boris Johnson trying to undermine or circumvent the withdrawal agreement the UK signed in December, would hint that there is more going on. The final scenario, however, is the most worrying of all. As Peter Foster observed in July, the UK negotiator David Frost's fundamental problem was that he was unable to present a clear position on the future UK regulatory environment because the debate in London that was still going on. Hard Brexiters led by Cummings wanted a light touch regime. It is possible that the hardliners have won the point and that no deal is now actively the aim. Now, you see, the thing about the no deal, which frankly, very few people seem to be talking about is the fact that no deal actually benefits the UK on the front, on one very, very particular, slightly unusual geographic front. A geographic front, however, that when you spend 10 minutes or even 5 minutes examining, you realise, of course, of yet another of the long, long list of reasons why Brexit was a bad idea in the first place. And I would talk all about it right now, but unfortunately it's been 15 minutes since the last time other people were talking in the studio, and I'm contractually obliged to let them talk every 15 minutes. So let's hear what they have to say, and I'll catch you all again very, very soon.
Whoa, Relax Radio.
আপনি হয়তোবা জানেন না যে রেডিও অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট ইজ 4 times more powerful than any other media. রিল্যাক্স রেডিওতে যদি অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292. আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relax Radio.
It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us here 24 hours and let the happiness come to you on Relax Radio. Tune in to Relax Radio.
It has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relax proudly presents Relax Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaxmedia.com. RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relax Radio.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the George's Breakfast Buffet. My name is Jorge Shaft, and of course you are listening to Relax Radio, a fun little station that I have been told with 100% certainty, yes that's right, it is literally 100% certainty, has some really cool other shows. So maybe after this one, you know, if you're looking on Facebook or Twitch or YouTube, I'm streaming on every platform. Today it's been all kinds of peachy. Then yeah, knock yourself out, have a good time, have a wonderful little listen. But of course, what's not so wonderful is Brexit, which is basically going to be the subject of today's first half. You see, the thing about it is, it's a subject that I've actually really not talked about all that much over the past couple of months, and it's really now just all boiling over. For me anyway, to the point where, frankly, this morning, there's little else I actually want to talk about. This is, of course, not exactly going to be the case. I've got another story, another secret little story that I've been sitting on for a few days. That will come up next. But in the meantime, let's catch up on where we were. So last night, the Parliament voted for the Internal Market Bill by a majority of 77. This was the Internal Market Bill is a bill that violates the current withdrawal agreement that Britain has with the European Union, mostly because of the fact that it does away with the arrangements with the Northern Ireland border. The Northern Ireland border being an open border, underpinned by the understanding originally that both parties were members of the European Union. However, let's keep going on the Byline Times article that was titled "Consumed by Lies, Britain's Masochistic Trashing of its Global Reputation," and let's find out a little bit more about what's been going on. This is all of the problems, all of the stuff with the no deal, going on, is deeper and it is ideological than you'd first expect. Quote, "If the UK is to go rogue and turn into a market disruptor, a notion with which Dominic Cummings' ramblings often flirt, it must have become clear that this would not be possible if the UK had remained a part of any rules-based structure and its actions subject to arbitration. Whatever the reasoning, the reputational damage that the UK will suffer if its government chooses to renege on a treaty it signed less than a year ago, it will be immeasurable. It will go into the world looking to sign treaties with every single potential partner, knowing that the UK's promises are, quite literally, not worth the paper they are written on. As Ian Dunt observes, it is much easier to throw a good reputation away than it is to create one." Appointments like that of the disreputable Tony Abbott, a former Australian Prime Minister, as a trade advisor to the government, only compound that sinking sense that the UK, like an impressionable teenager, has fallen in with a bad crowd. It risks becoming an international pariah. And in fact, you remember when I mentioned just before the other people were talking that the whole international pariah thing is actually something that really explains quite a bit about what the UK is doing. But nobody really seems to be talking about it. I'm not talking about from the point of view of like, becoming a market disruptor. About, let's just, profit, even if it screws over everyone else. A kind of classic prisoner's dilemma where you choose to defect instead of cooperate, if you're familiar with the prisoner's dilemma. However, there is a broader thing. You see, anybody who is familiar with history, with British history, reads up on like what Britain's been acting, finds that for most of Britain's history, there's been a very consistent policy goal, a very consistent theme going on. And that has been the idea of making sure that the European continent does not pose a threat to the UK. As an island, we are obviously, from a physical aggression point of view, safer from the continent because they can't march over to us and invade. They need to build ships. Building ships, however, requires industry. It requires lots of resources. It will require, of course, lots of people to sail them and to, make them work. And so Britain's policy goal and you see this really clearly in examples like the Napoleonic Wars, has always been to pick and choose different factions in the European continent and keep them, bickering and fighting and going up against each other. And rarely was it a case of, let's just, pick the stronger side. No, it's always been, a lot of it's been, hey, pick the weaker side in these arguments. And, as long as the European continent is busy fighting itself, bickering with each other, then they will be too busy to be building up a big old navy to invade Britain. Problem, though, after the Second World War, there was a bit of a shift on this. There was a realization that if a war or conflict broke out in the European continent again, with the introduction of nuclear weapons, things will turn out a little bit differently. And not in a way that Britain would, let's just say, be all that appreciative of. So instead, what Britain's policymakers advocated for, though, ended up not joining, and what the continent agreed to do was set up the EEC, set up the precursor organisation to the European Union. The simple logic idea of it was, if countries are trading with each other, mutually profiting off each other, then the money and the economy argument against war will be so great that there won't be any war. And I think this has been a huge success, and it's one of the primary reasons I am not just somebody who supports remaining a part of the European Union, but I'm actively a Europhile. I quite like the European Union, even as an institution without Britain in it, because of the sort of role it's played in making sure that there's peace in Europe, which generally something that I agree most of us would think is a nice thing. However, this is where 2016 throws in a big wrench, because Britain was a member of the European Union. It was all fine and dandy. Whenever there were disagreements, we didn't fight. On battlefields, we fought with words within, the chambers, within the institutions of the European Union. However, with us leaving, we're not in the room anymore. We're not in the debating chamber. And thus, the debating chamber will instead be filled with people annoyed at the fact that Britain has just pulled a rogue move and just stormed off and slammed the door on everybody. Now, I'm not exaggerating when I say that this actually represents, from sort of a pure geopolitical point of view, Britain's most vulnerable position in decades, maybe even centuries. Even in the huge conflicts of the 20th century, World War II, at least at that point, Britain had a big empire elsewhere in the world that it could rely on to support the mother country, if you will, even when the continent itself was completely enslaved by Hitler. That's not the case anymore, and that's not a guarantee anymore. That explains partially why Britain, the Brexiters, scramble so much to sign trade deals with everyone else. Most notably and amusingly, though a tragedy as well, was the fact that Britain signed a trade deal with Japan recently, which actually put in more stringent measures against protectionist policies than anything the European Union gave. Which, so much for the whole idea that especially many left-wing Brexiters had put forward, like, oh, if we leave the European Union, we'll be able to put in protectionism, and then it'll all be great. Wrong. Now we're signing a deal with Japan that's even more stringent and even more against protectionism than anything the European Union had made. But even all of that aside, even without those deals, we're now in a terrible position, because the European Union is united in a basic understanding of, hey, Britain just kind of spat on all of us and just slammed the door, and they said stuff about how our citizens are unwelcome in their country, for peaceful immigration. What the heck? What kind of rude little move is that? I find it quite funny how, the Brexiters, especially in the Conservative Party, make this big point sometimes. They're like, oh, don't worry, Viktor Orban, basically, in many ways, the rogue leader of Hungary in the European Union. Now, don't worry, he'll vote to veto anything that's too harsh on Britain, and then we'll all be fine, because, he agrees with us that the European Union is bad in some way, and he'll do it. No, he doesn't. In fact, Hungary is one of the most Europhile countries in the whole bloc, and in fact, Viktor Orban joined the cause. Well, not. I remember in particular, especially one of his ministers. I think it was like his finance minister. This was like in 2018. It was a few years ago. Made a big speech that was like, yeah, so Britain left the EU. You know, the same thing. It's like, so Britain's just left the EU. Well, thank you. Well, excuse me, and you're welcome, I guess, for spitting in our faces. What's all that about? And Hungary's just been voting it along with the rest of them consistently. And so there we are exposed. Britain is completely alone, isolated. And don't say, oh, we can rely on the United States, because the United States at the moment is led by a madman, basically, and who could well win the next election in 2 months' time. So, and a madman, by the way, who has obviously shown that he does not value people being loyal, being loyal to him, because he just backstabs them immediately if he benefits from it. But then, of course, yeah, what does that leave us? China? Do we really want to work with China, the communist dictatorship, with a lot of market policies that's confirmed, but a lot of spyware on their electronic devices when they sell them to Britain? You can see how the layers upon layers of logic here as to why I am such an avid Remainer at this point, to the point where the more Brexity types listening to this show might well be thinking, oh, what a Ramona. Guilty as charged. I'll say on that one, guilty as charged. But what do you think? Do you think that maybe the Britain is actually acting in a rational way with this whole withdrawal agreement? Do you think that there is potentially some extra clause in the bill, or some little extra factoid that shows that that might undermine everything that I said? It's very possible. I'm very open to that possibility. Or maybe you think that I'm not being harsh enough. You think maybe that I should be using maybe flowery language, profanity, or, well, profanity is against the rules, but you know what I mean. Using insults to say, hey, this is the worst possible thing. Whichever the case, I really want to read your opinion. I really want to read what you have to say on the comments section of the Facebook live stream, on the Relaks Radio live, Relaks Radio Facebook page. It'll be under live. You'll see me right there in my blue shirt. One of the sort of downsides I have to say of having the live stream is the fact that I can't do my little joke about, oh yeah, I'm actually in the most ridiculous outfit possible. It's like, no, I'm just in a normal blue shirt today. You can see my orange backpack. And you can also hear other people. Yes, I'm not the only voice who talks in this little microphone for Relaks Radio. There are in fact these strange people with really strange customs and beliefs who emerge literally out of the woodwork. It's really incredible. It happens just outside of the camera screen, like I've got a table here. They just emerge out of the table. It's really traumatic every time. But let's have a listen to what they have to say, because it's really interesting, and I hope you learn something from it. And I'll catch you all again very, very soon after the break.
Whoa, Relaks Radio.
আপনি হয়তোবা জানেন না যে রেডিও অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট ইজ 4 times more powerful than any other media. রিল্যাক্স রেডিওতে যদি অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292. আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relaks Radio.
Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us here 24 hours and let the happiness come to you on Relaks Radio. Tune in to Relaks Radio.
It has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relaks proudly presents Relaks Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaxmedia.com, RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relaks Radio.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the George's Breakfast Buffet. My name is Jorge Shaft, as it always is in this show. As I said, my name is Jorge Shaft and you are listening of course to the George's Breakfast Buffet. And I'm just going to go straight dive into a little story which I've sat on for a little while. Not because of some kind of nefarious plot, but mostly because it started to hit prominence on Thursday. And I considered talking about it on Thursday morning, but I had other issues on that day, so I decided to discuss those instead. And what's happened is now's the time to talk about it. Because Reuters News has just come out with a very good article to to put everything into a context, to describe everything. It's been a scene, you might have noticed, of apocalypse in the west coast of the United States. San Francisco, for example, had orange skies and a heavy fog over it for days on end. Los Angeles had a fog, had a level of smoke sufficient to force everyone indoors for days, more so than even the coronavirus. Thousands and thousands of people have been affected. Millions more are concerned. But what exactly is going on with the US West wildfire season? And asks, and how did it get this bad? Well, Reuters is here for the dive with the title of Explainer: How This Year's Destructive US West Wildfire Season Came to Be. I have to also speak. I very rarely actually do this, but I have to comment on the poignancy of one of the pictures of their front picture. They've chosen a very, very good one. It's basically the file photo is described as a U.S. flag is taped to the pole at the entrance of a house destroyed by fire in the aftermath of the Beachy Creek fire near Gates in Oregon. And you can just see the fact that, you wouldn't notice it at first, that all the trees are actually just completely burned out husks, but it kind of clicks on you when you realize the context. Like, wait a minute, because the first thing it looks like is like, oh, it's it's like a foggy evening, like it's like, maybe it's 5 o'clock in the evening in November on a foggy day, and the light's not that great, but you're like, but the light on this American flag that's just been taped onto this pole, that's actually fairly good. And then you click, like, all of those trees are just completely burned out. And then you realize that there's no buildings behind it either. And there's actually a bit of remnants that look like it could be a building, but just completely burned down. It's insane. It messes with my mind anyway. And so, very, very powerful picture. I approve. But anyway, dozens of conflagrations, says Reuters, have raged across more than 5 million acres, or 1.6 million hectares, in Oregon, California, and Washington state since August, laying waste to several small towns, destroying thousands of homes, and killing at least 35 people. The region's increasingly dry and overgrown forests have become large-scale tinderboxes over decades, while wildfires have become more frequent, more intense, and more deadly. And by the way, one little thing I have to mention, just the most crazy thing, was there was actually a group of 200 people in California at one point who actually got completely surrounded by the fires. And in the end, the mercifully, thankfully, the US Air Force ended up airlifting them out with helicopters. But man, it's this close. This close. I don't know how well you can see how close I've got it on my fingers. It's like this close to having 200 people burned to death in one go. That doesn't even bear thinking about. It really doesn't. Anyway, let's go back to Reuters on this. Is the problem poor forest management or climate change? US President Donald Trump blames the poor forest management, mainly a failure to cull overgrown forests, for the increasing number and intensity of fires. The governors of California and Oregon, which are the states that are the worst affected this season, say, however, on the other hand, that climate change is largely responsible. In true enlightened centrist, big galaxy brain moment, scientists are saying that both factors are at work. Starting in the early 1900s, wildfires were fought aggressively and suppressed, which led to a build-up of dead trees and brush in forested areas. This meant, of course, that there was more fuel for bigger, more intense, and damaging wildfires. But changes in climate and weather patterns, warming temperatures, periods of drought, and erratic rains are also causes. Dan Cayenne, a climate researcher at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California, San Diego, said, we don't want to minimize the impact of climate because it's significant already and because it's growing in the future. It's pretty intense. It's as I mentioned earlier, California is said to have 15 million hectares of forest, and which is a slightly nervous thing, let's put it like that. And they've already had 35 emergency fuel break projections this year. With which basically create gaps in vegetation that form natural barriers to fire spread and protect residents. But it's going to be a hard battle. Nearly 6,000 lightning strikes were recorded as hitting the state in mid-August in just one 24-hour stretch in a massive storm that happened this year, the biggest since 2008. 9 out of the 10 most destructive fires in California, in California's history, have only happened in the last decade, according to the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection. This is despite, of course, all of the modern forest management techniques. And then, there's the terrible cost at the end of it. 1.6 million hectares of forest burned, and 35 people unfortunately lost their lives. It's horrible. And it's a sign, in many ways, of things to come. there was a very, very... I think I'll leave this story off with something I saw from Greta Thunberg. I'm not normally a huge follower of Greta Thunberg, even though I often feel like I should be. I'm actually not. And anyway, she actually posted this picture that was basically a series of natural disasters that happened in all of August, just August alone. You have natural disasters of very unusual weather things. And basically was like, do you think this is still just, like a coincidence? It's not enough to just report this anymore. It's not even enough to make the connection and point out that this is caused by climate change. We need to do something. We need to do something to save the climate. These fires in California, and you remember way back in the halcyon days of January in Australia, aren't going to go away. Meanwhile, for Britain, the cost will be, it looks like, in these massive storms we've been getting. You remember just like Storm Ciara and Storm Dennis this year? That was just a straight double bill. Bam, bam, two big storms all at once. And just destroyed a couple villages and a few people. And, damaged up the country. That's just a window of what's going to come if we don't get our carbon emissions in order. But unfortunately, that would require changing government. That would require changes in regulation. And hey, we live in the timeline where in 2019, the British public looked at all of these, the troubles of the world, looked at all of the problems and went, yes, 5 more years of conservative rule. It almost writes itself as a Greek tragedy worthy of any of the ancients. But what do you think? Do you think that maybe I'm exaggerating about everything? Or do you think that I'm actually have a point and that I'm actually completely correct on 100% of everything that I ever say? Whichever the case is, you can, of course, contact the studio. I have got a Facebook live stream up and running, and I make sure to check the comments, and we'll engage and talk about your comments. I like doing that stuff. But first of all, let's have some other people talk, and then let's see how things pan out. Okay? Yeah, it's everything's gonna be fine, except when they're not. I'll catch you all again very, very soon.
Whoa, Relaks Radio.
আপনি হয়তোবা জানেন না যে রেডিও অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট ইজ 4 times more powerful than any other media. রিল্যাক্স রেডিওতে যদি অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292. আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relax Radio.
It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us, 24 hours, and let the happiness come to you on Relax Radio. Tune in to Relax Radio.
It has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relax proudly presents Relax Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaxmedia.com. RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relaks Radio.
Hi everybody, and welcome to the George's Breakfast Buffet. My name is Jorge Shaft, and you are listening, of course, to Relaks Radio. If you want to comment on anything that I've been talking about, and I have talked about a lot of very controversial things, from climate change, to Brexit, to Brexit, to Brexit. Yes, it was one of those episodes, what can I say? Then you can absolutely contact the studio. I always make sure to check the Facebook live stream, check up for the comments as they come, and, respond and interact. Now, I like the idea of building up like a more sort of interactive community with this show and making something for, I guess, socializing. But that would be like a parasocial relationship, so I'm not going to think about it that much. Of course, the time is 9:23, which means that in line with regular scheduled programming, if only 23 minutes late, we are, of course, in the second half. And I'm going to veer off a bit into, from the usual second half thing. Of course, for all those unaware, the first half of the show is always about politics and the news, but the second half is generally about general knowledge. But I've really had in my mind very, very intensely an accusation that's been snowballing. Last week I gave a little bit of an incoherent ramble. Also got a very itchy nose. I gave a bit of a very, I'd say incoherent ramble, though it actually holds up fairly alright, as a discussion about how I was increasingly feeling like society and governments, especially in the West anyway, were increasingly anti-human. So that, in many ways, actually helped sort of clarify my thoughts and really directed my attentions to this instinct, to this feeling. Well, it turns out that I found a very, very interesting little tangent. And that, of course, is the fact that there actually is a philosophy of anti-humanism that is out there. Now, there are, of course, two reactions to the idea of anti-humanism, which to me sounds like some kind of crazy, made-up ideology. So I'm sorry if you're an anti-humanist, but hey, that's what it sounds to me. The first one is best summarized in this little article I found from 2019 from a site called CapX. Not very sure about its veracity, but it's got an interesting thing here. It's titled, "Beware the Anti-Humanism of the Green Movement." Okay. "We're entering dangerous territory," says CapX. "The radicalization of the environmentalist movement, as seen in the streets of London over the past week, is accelerating and is increasingly acquiring a darker aspect. The anti-humanist strand of environmentalism is best exemplified by the renewed push to reduce the world's population. Unlike in the past, some governments, such as that of India, forced men and women into sterilization programs, and others, like the Chinese government, mandated one-child policies. These initiatives, however, are voluntary. This makes them morally preferable, even if they remain intellectually coherent. A populous world is a rich world, and a rich world is better for the environment." Excuse me there. Parched throat, I should be drinking more water. Always remember to stay hydrated. By the way, on the whole notion of the rich world and more populous world, the book I'm reading is actually very, very much on that subject. I'm reading Thomas Malthus's an essay on the principle of population. More on that on Monday when I have finished reading it and will give it a review in the book review. But anyway, that tangent aside, CapX says, "It should go without saying, though it bears repeating in some parts of the world, that motherhood ought to be entered by consenting women. Under such circumstances, the optimal global birth rate and national birth rate should be determined by women's personal decisions. Normally, these rates are impacted by a variety of factors, including women's religious beliefs, where birth control is concerned, economic forces, and opportunity costs that women incur by joining the labour force instead of staying at home to care for children. But most people, including a lot of prospective mothers, are also influenced by broader social trends, the zeitgeist, if you will. Today, the new quasi-religion, according to CapEx, is making inroads into popular culture and making claims about the optimal extent of female fecundity. The environmentalist movement, which started as a noble effort to make people and nature more symbiotic, increasingly sees human beings as a plague upon the planet. As such, environmentalism is running the risk of transmogrifying into a fully fledged credo of anti-humanism. Examples of this dangerous trend are abound, including Birth Strikers, which is a voluntary organisation that started in the UK. People who have decided to eschew parenthood in response to the coming climate breakdown and civilizational collapse. According to Fast Company, meanwhile, which is a monthly American business magazine that focuses on technology, business, and design, 38% of Americans between the age of 18 and 29 agree that couples should consider the negative impact of climate change when thinking of having their children. I think it's becoming a bit clear what is being meant by anti-humanism in this. And it is exactly the thing that you would, assume if you heard the term straight up. Anti-humanism is, anti-human. It's, hey, we don't like human beings. In this case, in a very environmental context. We don't like the fact that human beings use resources from nature, to stay alive. And we see that human overuse of resources is damaging the environment. It's destroying the climate. The climate, being destroyed, has horrible impacts on human beings. So, in order to save the climate, save nature, save the animals, we're not going to do that whole, having children thing. But of course, this is not the only interpretation that can be put forward by the term anti-human, or anti-humanism. Sorry, not anti-human. The meaning that CapEx is describing is clearly anti-human and is clearly showing a sort of a real-world example of anti-humanism as you would first and foremost understand it being applied to the world. It's in many ways, though personally I would talk instead about a philosophical concept which I've been pretty scared of and have talked about many times on this show, which you can listen to on the Relaks Radio book library, is the term eco-fascism, and the idea that the next sort of fascist dictatorship will use the climate collapse as justification for its own power. But as I said, there are alternative beliefs, there are alternative views of seeing it. Now I talk about them, but unfortunately I am contractually obliged to let the other people emerge from the woodwork and have a chat. So I hope they're nice. Be polite. I hear that their tea is very, very good. And I'll catch you all again very, very soon.
Whoa, Relaks Radio.
আপনি হয়তোবা জানেন না যে রেডিও অ্যাডভার্টাইজমেন্ট ইজ 4 times more powerful than any other media. রিল্যাক্স রেডিওতে যদি অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292. আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relaks Radio.
It's time for a show on Relaks Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relaks Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us, 24 hours, and let the happiness come to you.
has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relax proudly presents Relax Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist, or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaxmedia.com, RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relax Radio.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the George Breakfast Buffet. Joining me in the studio today is, of course, pressing the wrong button, which is why we heard a few beats there from that little thing. Also joining me in the studio today is, of course, the knowledge that my name is Jorge Shaft, and you are listening to Relax Radio. The time is 9:34, which means that, of course, we are in the second half. The half I like doing more because I feel a lot more like, hey, I can do whatever I want in this. But most people I know, for a fact, I see it in the Facebook live streams, always stick around more for the first half, getting the politics and the commentary, which is fine. Because it means even less accountability when I talk about this very interesting notion I've found, which is that, you remember in the last segment, I talked about how anti-humanism is interpreted as basically being fundamentally against, if you will, the interests of the human race. And I used an article in CapEx to really demonstrate that point. The writer of that article describing, an increasing, misanthropy and an increasing hatred of human beings, creeping into the environmental movement, something I'm actually quite worried about myself. Clearly that whole article was saying, oh yeah, there's this strand of anti-humanism in the environmental movement. And yeah, well, you can't argue with that definition, that there are some people and there are some considerations within the environmental movement that are fundamentally anti-humanism. But it's not the only way of interpreting it. It's not actually the only way of understanding the philosophy. I've got Wikipedia up. It's not usually my kind of way, but I have been doing it more recently, which is maybe not the best thing in the world. It's got an article called Anti-Humanism. But anti-humanism, immediately, first thing you notice is it's got a little tagline just underneath that says, not to be confused with misanthropy. Because misanthropy is really what most people would think if you said, oh, that person is an anti-humanist. So, what's going on? If someone who's anti-humanist is not actually a misanthrope, what's the philosophy? In social theory and philosophy, says Wikipedia, anti-humanism, or anti-humanism with a hyphen, is a theory that is critical of traditional humanism, traditional ideas about humanity and the human condition. Central to anti-humanism is the view that philosophical anthropology and its concepts of human nature, man, or humanity should be rejected as historically relative, ideological, or metaphysical. Okay, alright. Let's dive further. In the late 18th and 19th centuries, the philosophy of humanism was a cornerstone of the Enlightenment. Human history was seen as a product of human thought and action, to be understood through the categories of consciousness, agency, choice, responsibility, and moral values. Human beings were viewed as possessing common essential features. From that belief, there is a universal moral code that is understood to be within all humans. I'm paraphrasing this sentence, by the way, which is followed inherently by all people free and equal. For liberal humanists such as Immanuel Kant, the universal law of reason was a guide towards total emancipation from any kind of tyranny. And humanism, all cards on the table, is, first of all, I have two cards to put on the table. First of all, it's a philosophy that I actually hold to some extent. I've pulled up the Wikipedia page for humanism, but having read through it, I agree that it's actually a fairly accurate term for what I believe on this front anyway. And that is fluctuated according to successive intellectual movements which have identified with it. Generally, however, humanism refers to a perspective that affirms some notion of human freedom and progress. It views human beings as solely responsible for the promotion and development of individuals and emphasizes a concern for humans in relation to the world. In modern times, humanist movements are typically non-religious, aligned with secularism, and today humanism may refer to a non-theistic life stance centered on human agency and looking to science rather than revelation from a supernatural source to understand the world. Of course, you might have immediately noticed that those are not contradictory. In fact, both of those beliefs, the idea that human beings are the sort of, the center of things, they're the drivers of progress, is completely compatible with the idea that you look to science instead of revelation as the source to understand the world. The idea of, let's look at what the latest studies are, what are people concluding in regards to moral philosophy. That's what humanists, I've noticed in the humanist movements, tend to emphasize most, is like we look to various different kind of moral philosophers and studies, scientific studies, to build our moral compasses. And as I said, I identify with the movement. I have a lot of respect for the activists who get involved in it. But I think you're starting to notice that anti-humanism in that light is starting to get a bit of a different hue, isn't it? Criticism of humanism as being overly idealistic began in the 19th century. For Friedrich Nietzsche, humanism was nothing more than an empty figure of speech, a secular version of theism. For Max Stirner, he expressed that a similar position in his book, The Ego and Its Own, published several decades before Nietzsche's work. Nietzsche argued that in the genealogy of morals, that human rights exist as a means for the weak to constrain the strong. As such, they do not facilitate the emancipation of life, but instead deny it. In another front, the young Karl Marx was often considered to be a humanist, but he rejected the idea of human rights as a symptom anti-humanist. Hang on a moment. I've lost my train of thought for a moment. Basically, he was considered a humanist as he rejected the idea of human rights as a symptom of the very dehumanization that they were intended to oppose. Given that capitalism forces individuals to behave in an egotistical manner, they are in constant conflict with each other, and are thus in need of rights to protect themselves. True emancipation, he asserted, could only come about through the establishment of communism, which abolishes private property. Meanwhile, the mature Karl Marx sees the idea of humanity as an unreal abstraction that masks conflicts between antagonistic classes. Since human rights are abstract, the justice and equality they protect is also abstract, and permitting such extreme inequalities in the reality. Meanwhile, in the 20th century, the view of humans as rationally autonomous was challenged first by Sigmund Freud, and then it's been that's largely been backed up by psychology since. There's actually been a lot of sort of discussion in psychology. It's almost become a bit of a meme, like, oh, Sigmund Freud was wrong on everything. Well, on this very basic point, he was actually completely correct. And that was controversial in his time, by the way. But it is a fact that human beings are actually pretty irrational, and we make a lot of important choices, a lot of life decisions, not based off, sitting down and thinking about the pros and cons and going, oh yes, well, clearly, this is the best because everything points to this being the best. It's like, no, it's more like we decide basically off, we sit down and we go, oh, geez, would it be nice if we went and did this? But acknowledging that is an anti-humanist in the sense of the traditional understanding is a fairly anti-humanist stance. Because you're not arguing, oh, human beings, their choices, their actions, their reason is what's influencing history. Because if people are not being reasonable, then how can their choices be, if you will, anything but predetermined? How can they be anything but, inevitable? It really does make you think, actually, then. The anti-humanist stance comes in multiple forms. It comes in the form of structuralism, post-structuralism, and there are various other sort of, what is labelled as cultural examples, which, actually looking at that, cultural examples are actually just various sort of novels and books that discuss ideas that are opposed to humanism. And put like that, it makes sense. Humanism is, of course, a philosophy, both a moral one and a way of understanding the history of the world, which is popular with a lot of people who believe it and a lot of people who live by it. And, well, naturally, anybody who is proposing an alternative viewpoint, who's proposing maybe even a viewpoint that is inherently antagonistic to those ideas, in humanism, well, they are opponents. And on the most basic, fundamental level, you could call them anti-humanist, which is really sort of give me pause for thought. It's given me pause for thought that such a potentially provocative little term, such a potentially controversial accusation of, oh, you're an anti-humanist, could actually turn out to be completely right. They could instead turn around and go, yeah, of course, I believe in communism, and communism is an anti-humanist ideology. Little wink. But what do you think? Do you think that anti-humanist should just should maybe expand in the public consciousness to encompass all of these different meanings? Or do you think it maybe the secondary meanings, the notion that it's against the humanist philosophies, should instead maybe be shunted away and focus more on, oh, if you are anti, the human race, if you don't like the idea of people having children, or yourself having children, now that should be what anti-humanist means. Or maybe precisely the opposite. Maybe you think that misanthropy, hatred of human beings, is actually a really good term for that kind of belief. And anti-humanism in the understanding of, oh, that's, when you don't like human beings, maybe you think that should just be dropped entirely. Whatever among the thousands of different takes you could possibly be considering you have in mind. I really want to hear it. I really want to read it. And you can do so. On the Facebook live stream, I am up and running. I always make sure to check the comments, and I am looking at the comments right now to see that we've unfortunately not had anybody since Sonar has posted, but I hope Sonar's having a really nice day. But in the meantime, and in between time, some other people really want to have a chat. So I'll catch you all again very, very soon, and see you around.
Whoa, Relax Radio.
অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করতে চান তাহলে আমাদেরকে আজই যোগাযোগ করুন on 020-7474-9292 আমাদের সাথে অ্যাডভার্টাইজ করুন from £99 a month. Increase your business by advertising on Relaks Radio.
It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. It's time for a show on Relax Radio. It talks about me and you. So listen to us, 24 hours, and let the happiness come to you on Relax Radio. Tune in to Relax Radio.
It has been too long. No one has taken the initiative to know who you are and what you do. Well, Relax proudly presents Relax Media to unite and expose all media-related personalities under one umbrella. If you are an artist, or maybe you're looking for one, look no further. Log on to www.relaxmedia.com, RELAKS media.com. In return, you get a free webpage and exposure to wider fan appreciation and contacts. Also, optional personal manager. Don't delay.
Relax Radio.
Hi everybody. I said my first hello there into a silence mic. Welcome to the George Breakfast Buffet, but not for much longer though. The time is 9:50, and which means that we are almost out. Oh no, indeed. But don't worry, we are in the second half, which is a rule we're just about to break, because I found a hilarious freaking little news article that came out at 5 a.m. in British time, which I absolutely adore. And it was kind of sitting there, because in the first half I mentioned a Guardian article, and it's just kind of sat there. It was just so tempting. I've had to click it, and it has delivered so well. Alright, so the title of this article is Trump election ad uses stock military image featuring Russian fighter jets. Okay. A fundraising advertisement for US President Donald Trump's re-election campaign reportedly used a stock photo featuring Russian fighter jets and weapons as part of a call for viewers to support our troops. The ad, which has since been removed, was made by the Trump Make America Great Again committee, which is run by the Republican National Committee and the Trump campaign. The stock image shows 5 soldiers in silhouette against a sunset as 3 planes fly overhead. Peter Spray, however, who helped design US Air Force planes, told Politico that the jet that was featured in the ad is definitely a MiG-29, as did the director of the Center for Analysis of Strategies and Technologies in Moscow, Ruslan Pukov. I'm glad to see it supporting our troops, said Spray. Pukov pointed out also that at least one of the soldiers in the image was also carrying a Russian-made AK-74 assault rifle. Politico said that the Trump campaign did not respond to requests for comment, and the RNC declined to comment too. But I love this. This is precious. This is actually genuinely a really precious thing, and it was the best laugh I've had in a little while. The MiG-29, by the way, was designed by the Soviet Union in the 1970s to combat U.S. Air Force fighter jets. Their appearance in the campaign ad comes as recent reports from intelligence officials have suggested that the Russian government is meddling in the U.S. election by attempting to undermine Joe Biden. The Democratic candidate, in order to boost Trump's chances of winning. It's like, duh, of course we support Donald Trump. Look, Russian military support the president. And I'm sorry, I've just done like a little caricature thing there, which is maybe not in like the right. Maybe it's not exactly politically correct, I guess. But I'm just having too much fun with this. It's like, support our troops, the Russian troops. It's like yes, look at our glorious Air Force. Yes, it just took off from St. Petersburg Airport today. Support the Russian military as they fight hard in, against the Ukrainians. It's very important to support the troops. Vote Donald Trump. I actually had another little thing planned. Like I was gonna have a short little thing, but honestly, the big dumb smile on my face, which you may or may not be able to see, is clearly taking precedence. Everything about this is so precious. The fact that the Trump campaign is so kind of it's so just unknowable and silly that they just go like, oh yeah, well that's a fighter jet, yeah, go on. But like I can just imagine the room when they were discussing it. I imagine it's like, three people like all crowded around a computer, and like one guy kind of sitting down and like, oh yes, yeah, let's put like soldiers on there, get like stock pictures of soldiers, yeah, all that looks good. Oh, but what about the sky bar? Oh, I know. What if we put the soldiers down and we put fighter jets in the air? Like, oh yeah. Quick, go on Google and get pictures of fighter jets and like put them on there. Do some Photoshop and let's get like a trail. Like, oh yeah, and it's like, oh yeah, look at that. And the picture itself is a very, very, very cheesy, almost movie poster like thing. It's got like three soldiers, silhouetted, sunset behind them, and three jets, flying forwards. It's a classic kind of, oh yeah, look, support our troops. The army is the best thing ever. Look at them. They've got all this powerful hardware. They're all so great. Are you feeling patriotic yet? You should be feeling very patriotic. And then it's like, those jets are not even American. I can't keep a straight face. I can't keep a straight face on this. It's especially, so competent that they do that. But then especially when the Trump campaign and Donald Trump have been multiple times accused of being in the pockets and in bed with the Russians. And whether that's true or not is completely secondary to this story. Because this is just hilariously fun. It's just, I'm sure somewhere on MSNBC or Jezebel or on Twitter, someone's going to go, oh, look at the proof that they support the Russians. Yeah, the Russians love them because they post Russian military hardware on there. But I'm just having fun at this point. Ultimately, it's not a serious thing. It's just a silly mistake in a graphics, on a graphic that is just a silly, run-of-the-mill, casual, oh yeah, support our troops, are you feeling patriotic yet? Type thing. But sometimes on the George's Breakfast Buffet, we are allowed to have fun. And not only we are allowed to have fun, though. Other people are allowed to have fun. Yes, other people, including other presenters on Relaks Radio. Presenters who are talented, intelligent, have something to say. You can watch them all, of course, on the Facebook live streams that they will all post up. And I highly recommend some of them. I've been listening recently to a fair amount of Kayla Rose's Soul Seed as just like one little recommendation. It's all kinds of good stuff. But when you are doing that, you can't listen to my show. You can't listen to the George's Breakfast Buffet. So I'll do them the courtesy and end the show right now. Thank you very much for listening and have a very great day.